Hi, my name is Traesa Titel, and I'm going to present information about PHP if-else and else-if statements. The things we'll cover will be what are conditional statements, where are these PHP conditional statements written, how do they interact with other parts of the system, why do we use conditional statements in websites, and how are these conditional statements implemented? So I'll give you some examples. So first of all, conditional statements allow blocks of code to be executed depending on certain conditions. The syntax is to, especially in PHP, is like many other languages, but you start with your PHP beginning tag, and then if, and in parentheses, the specific condition that you want to test. When that condition is true, then the code within the curly braces will be run. If there's only one line of code, you don't need to include the curly braces, but for multiple lines of code, you'll want to include that. So that's the basic if statement, executed only if the condition is true. Next, we have the else if statement. This must be coupled with an if statement. You can't have just an else. So if the condition is false, then the else code is run, and that code again is in the curly braces. Finally, you have the else if statement. This condition happens when the first if is false. Then you have an else, a new condition, and that could be true or false. If this condition is true, then this code is executed. If they're both false, then the final else would be executed. Let's look at an example of that. So I have a variable here, grade, and I've set it equal to 80. If the grade is greater than 75, then you'll have an echo out, you are passing the class, great job. Else, and it's going to test, so it's going to be less than 75, but if the grade is less than 70, then you are not currently passing the class and you should see a tutor. If both of those conditions are false, meaning you're between 70 and 75, then you are currently passing the class but in danger. You may want to see a tutor or do extra credit. So that kind of just gives you a simple example of how that logic works. Here is a diagram of where conditional statements live, and the PHP conditional statements are housed here on the back-end server. Conditional statements can be used to determine information that should be passed back to the client after receiving information from the client. So if the client clicks on a link, then you can use a conditional statement to know what to send back to the client. Additionally, PHP conditional statements could be used to determine what information to use or what to do with information received from the database. So when it pulls database information from the database, then it could pass that information to the user or do calculations on that information. For example, like in a banking application, it could check the login information with the database. It could check balances with the database before offering options to pay bills or do transactions. So why do we use conditional statements? Or they're really powerful in making websites dynamic and to respond to the user. So here's an example of how that works. When I open up a website, this is SnugMug, a photo repository, I decide that I want to log in. So when I click on login, then my conditional statement receives that information and then responds to it by sending me the login screen. As I plug in my login information, again, I send that into the script. It runs conditional statements, checks with the database. If my login information is correct, then it will send me to my repository, pulling up my information specific to me. And so that's how it actually is dynamic in responding to my actual independent actions. So let's look at that in some code. Here is something we've already done. So you're actually familiar with if statements. So last week we did an if the link is an object, then echo out it worked. So I just changed it to actually show the home screen if the link actually worked. So let's see what that looks like. Here's my connection page. And here we see it popped up the home screen when we actually were able to get the link. So here I gave another example, just using some of the information we got from our website that we're working on. Here, I can pull in the information from the database. We have Tony Stark as our client from the clients table of the database and the information. And then I have a Boolean that says, is he logged in, true or false? So here I have a nested if statements. The outside if is saying whether or not the person is logged in. If it is true, then go ahead and check all the other conditions. If it's false, then skip all of this code and go to the final else. So right now it said is true. So yes, the person is logged in. And then it's going to check for the client level. The client level equals 3, then print that out. Else, if it equals 2, then print that out. And then the final else is, so right now it says 3. So let's look and see what it's printing out. Welcome, Tony Stark. Thanks for being a level 3 client. All right, and if we change that to, we'll give him a level 1, demote him all the way down. And good. Welcome, Tony Starks. Thanks for being one of our newest clients. All right, and we see if we change the login to false, it won't execute any of those internal nested statements, but will only go to the final else of that outer block. You must log in or register before continuing. So obviously the false registered. So I hope you can see that conditional statements, especially if else and else if statements, are really powerful in responding to the user and passing information based on the specific needs or the information that you have about the user. Good luck and enjoy writing conditional statements. Thanks so much. Bye.